Pessimists sound smart, optimists make money.
After years in finance, Rob Khazzam made a dramatic leap. 2 weeks to sell everything he owned, break up with his girlfriend, and fit his entire life into a carry-on backpack.
I have to leave Canada, I have to get out of my comfort zone, and I have to change my life now. There are a few moments in your life where you have an opportunity to get on a rocket ship. Don't waste your time asking what seat you're getting on the rocket ship.
A little startup called Uber wanted to send him to Eastern Europe to build their international expansion team.
You will be working 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The launch team lives in the cities they're launching. My boss in private equity was really angry with me. They said, you're leaving a private equity job, you've done the CFA program, you're on track to be a partner, you're making a lot of money, and you're gonna go join a taxi company. What are you doing?
The result? More success than he ever dreamed, and an idea that became the inspiration for Float, a company that's now worth over $200 million, serving 4,000 Canadian businesses, and raised $70 million from Goldman Sachs in 2025 alone.
When we started together, we had $80,000 in the bank. We didn't even have enough capital to hire an employee. We offered 2% of the company to entry-level developers, and they wouldn't take it.
Discover his step-by-step frameworks for choosing co-founders, how he validates market opportunities, and why he chose to build in Canada instead of Silicon Valley.
Why do you care?
When I started to see the economic data, the future of our economy, it actually pissed me off. And I thought, I have an obligation and a responsibility to do something and help because Canada has given me everything.
Welcome to the Canadian Founder Spotlight Series. I'm Gregory Foran. Let's meet Rob Khazzam from Float.
Rob, welcome to the Canadian Founder Spotlight Series.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I want to start at the beginning in your entrepreneur story. And you've had what you called an irrational resistance to working for other people since the age of 12. Tell me about that kid who was obsessed with the early internet instead of doing his homework.
Yeah, so I grew up in Toronto. My memories of school were mostly negative. So I struggled a lot with work ethic. I struggled to be motivated. I struggled to do homework on time. And I was really insecure about it. I left everything to the last minute. I really felt dumb. But alongside that, at home, I was really passionate about companies. My dad ran his family business, and I would go to him to work often and talk about, like, how do you know what to charge people? I ask him like 1,000 questions about his business and go to the office and help him do paperwork. And so I started to develop like a real keen interest, even as an 11 and 12-year-old, of this idea of working for myself, being able to set my own terms, and a real passion for like what it would take to build a company. And so my dad was an inspiration to me. I had some cousins that had built businesses before. And this was happening at a moment in time where the world was going from dial-up modems to cable modems. So I was using the internet for about 1.5 years, 2 years before the cable modem, and thought it was mind-blowing. Like, all of my time was spent doing that instead of doing homework, launching FTP servers and building really basic websites and copying websites and then trying to edit the HTML and just going down these rabbit holes. And then the cable modem era came, and that changed everything. That for me was like, that year after the cable modem was mind-blowing to be on the internet at that moment in time and learn about ways you could make money. And so it started me down a path of building a lot of side hustles as a student, and a whole set of like my first entrepreneurial experiences as a result of that.
How did you have that confidence to pivot to something else? Because school for me at that point in time, I had a very similar experience where I wasn't confident in school. I wasn't very good at it. I shifted to sports and athletics because that was like kind of like my thing. I guess that was my identity. But you were fortunate enough to have the confidence to pursue something else. Like, where does that come from?
I wasn't confident. I mean, I was actually an incredibly insecure person in school and among my peers because I felt dumb. But, you start to develop instincts and you try things. So there were some early experiences. The first one that sticks out that really sort of was the beginning for me, HP, I don't know if you remember this, released the CD-ROM writer. It was like the HP CDR W500, and it was $500. And I went to Best Buy and I saw it and I couldn't afford it. And I thought, I know how to download music. I know how to download movies. Yeah. If I buy this device, and I did the math, what could I charge? And then how many units would I have to sell to pay back the $500? And so I went to my parents and said, I have this idea. I want to do this. Will you buy this for me? I'll pay you back in, X months. And thankfully they said yes, and I did that. And so I bought a stack of blank CDs, and I would burn movies and mix tapes for people, and I would sell them. So I went to school with two pieces of paper. One was a list of movies, all pirated, that were available, and then a list of basically if you pick 20 songs for $20, I'll burn any CD you want. You just give me the names of the songs. Sure. And I paid them back in like 8 weeks. And so that is a little like nugget of confidence where you go, I had an idea, people probably didn't understand it, it worked. And I did that and I started making money. And then I learned how to sell on eBay. And I was obsessed with this idea of like sourcing cheap things and selling them on eBay and arbitraging what it cost me to pay for it and then sell it. And that worked. And I sold a bunch of Mitchell and Ness jerseys on eBay. And so now I was making, a couple $100 a month as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old. And then I bought a device to program satellite cards. And then I ran a neighborhood business, which was, if you had DirecTV at the time, this was an illegal business. In Canada, DirecTV wasn't offered. So you could get someone to program your card and get access to DirecTV. But every month it would go down. Yeah, it would get zapped. You remember that? Yeah, 100%. So there was someone in my neighborhood, an older gentleman, that was charging people $15 every time their card got zapped. Yeah. And I'd like to think I stumbled on the SaaS model because I came up at the time with the idea of DirecTV was zapping it more frequently. So he used to have it every 3 months, and then every 2 months, every month. And I was having twice a month, 3 times a month. So I said, for $20 a month, I'll do it as many times as you need it. And then I won that business from a lot of these people that had been going to this Jewish baker to get this done. And so suddenly I had, 20 clients a month. I was making $400 a month, and I had, my computer and my program thing. And so those were the early experiences that helped me understand that there are these arbitrage opportunities out there. You can build something, and doing them and making money and seeing them work, some of them not work, gave me confidence.
Where did that initial confidence come from, though? Like, you were pursuing it, was it your parents backing you in that first idea and saying, Rob, go for it? Was that super influential?
Yeah, my parents were really influential. My dad used to say to me as a kid, we drive to Montreal 5 hours and 5 hours back, and I would be asking questions the entire time of like how things work in the world and how business works. And he would hammer into me. I'd say, well, that's really hard. That's impossible. And he would say, like, nothing's impossible. You can do whatever you want in life, but you have to work hard. And so he was someone that from an early age sort of watered that entrepreneurial spirit. He said, if you want to come work with me, great, but I don't want you to come work in the family business if you don't want to. Go carve your own path. So he was someone that didn't push me into a corporate job. He said, if you want to go build a business, you should. No one in the world is smarter than you are. You just need to go and learn and work hard and do it. My mom, on the other side, was more risk averse. She wanted me to get a job, but she, more than anyone in my life, hammered into me this idea of like work ethic. If you want something, go do it. And she did push me a lot. So when I didn't study and didn't do well in school, she would be the one saying, if you don't do this, you're going to grow up and you're going to not have a college degree. We're not going to support you, and you're not going to get to do any of those things. So she would often remind me when I was dreaming big, but not doing my homework and not doing things, to get back to work. And she was a big inspiration for me as someone who immigrated to Canada after the revolution in Iran, came with nothing. And I was very fortunate to be brought up in a privileged upbringing. And she was someone that reminded me constantly, I didn't have any of this. Your dad didn't have any of this. So you better make the most of it. And you better know that nothing comes to you in life without hard work.
That's awesome. That was going to be my question, actually. Like, did they give you shit for not being good at school, or were they?
Yeah, this was a constant source.
It was a constant thing in their lives.
It was now you look back and you laugh, but it was, at the time, it was traumatic. My parents pulled me out of schools. I later learned I had ADHD, so it made a lot more sense. But they fortunately recognized. I went to a very large public school. I was in a class with 40 people, 38 people. And they could see like it wasn't working. And so they basically gave me an ultimatum, which is, we're going to move you to an alternative school. You're going to go there and you're going to do well. And if you do well and you get into college, we'll pay for it. But if you don't, and you don't graduate from school, then you're going to be working every day and you're not going to just live here for free. And so there were a couple of moments in time where they helped a lot. And, that transfer in high school was one. And then I went to university. I went to a university in Halifax, And after 2 years, I could feel it wasn't going to work out there. And I really wanted to get to Western and go to business school. My mom sponsored me in a very important sense. She said, if you want to transfer and you want to do this, I'll help you and we'll support you. But you got to make it work. This is your last chance. And she supported me. I went to summer school for a summer to take a bunch of the prerequisite courses I needed. And I was the last person admitted into the business program at the Richard Ivey School of Business. And so that for me was a bit of a seminal moment. It was getting into a program I felt I didn't belong in at all, and working my way up to it. And I got a conditional acceptance, but they said, if you take this summer course, you pretty much have to get 100% on it or else you're not going to get in. And I positioned my application as a turnaround story. Like, no one wants this more than me. No one's going to work harder than me. Look at how I've sort of changed myself in the last couple of years, going from like a D to, I don't know, B plus or an A minus, and getting into that program and then being surrounded by those people was a life-changing experience that changed my life forever, for sure.
And you didn't look back from that point?
No, I mean, it was business school. Again, it was a very different world. It wasn't about entrepreneurship. It was about finance and accounting and consulting and the rat race. And I got more competitive. I started to realize, like, I struggled to apply myself when I'm not really passionate about the subject matter, but in the subjects that I'm really passionate about, I can be the best.
You crushed it.
And that gave me confidence.
Is where you're at now kind of, were there people that doubted you, I guess is my question, early on? And does that still fuel you to this point today?
I don't know that people doubted me, but I think this idea of being an underdog has always been a very big motivator to me. I don't like to, for whatever reason, I work better when my back is against the wall. And so I used to psych myself a lot into, you're not going to be good enough. You're not going to graduate. You're not going to do this. And it would motivate me to work like hell. And when I graduated, something really formative happened to me, which is I graduated in 2008, 2009 during the financial crisis. Yeah. And suddenly my job prospects were terrible. So when I graduated from this, very prestigious business school, I should have been able to walk into this, great job and, maybe make six figures, which at the time was what success seemed like. Financial crisis hit and I couldn't get a job. I couldn't get an interview. I failed my first 25 interviews that I did. And if you're in business school, like, that's your nightmare. No one wants to come to class and say, like, they still don't have a job for next year. And not only did I not have a job for next year, I didn't have a job. We graduated in May until November. And that experience from May to November was formative. I failed and failed and failed. I felt really sorry for myself. I remember coming home, like, crying and blaming the world and saying I was screwed over. And my mom came over and said, if you want something in life, go work at it. And I set up a spreadsheet and I put in as many contacts as I could find. And I said, I don't know how to find a job, but I know how to network. And I'm going to go meet with every single person I can. I'm going to cold email and cold call every equity research analyst, every investment banking VP. I'm going to be the scrappiest person in the country trying to find a job. And I went down rabbit holes and still didn't get jobs. And then one day, my mom said, go talk to this person. He works at a bank. He might be able to help you. He was at an IT department at a bank. And I thought, like, this is not going to go anywhere. This is a waste of time. He was like the 94th person on my list, probably. And she gave me a kick in the butt and said, no, you're going to go. You don't have a job and you're going to go meet this person. So I went and talked to him. He gave me a bit of advice, but it wasn't a relevant conversation for what I wanted to do. I started doing the CFA program because I thought, at the very least, while I'm doing the CFA program, I can learn and be ready to hit the ground running. So I self-studied for the CFA level 1 and I did it that summer. And that person that I met called me a couple months later and said, I was just out for dinner with some MBA classmates. They're looking for an analyst in this private equity firm. And I said, like, I'm not going to get a job in private equity. And he said, well, try. And at the time, I've been doing a lot of stock investing. And so I was gearing up for this interview and very nervous and very underexperienced to do LBO modeling and all these things. Unfortunately, they posed a question, which was, which is better as an investment, Coke or Pepsi? You have to write your response in 3 hours and it can fit on a page. And for me, that was perfect because I've been doing investing and really operating this idea of I don't want to analyze businesses, I like this idea of having a stake in the ground. So I'm actually going to be someone that doesn't just do the analysis. And so I wrote this memo, Coke first Pepsi, and I was up against 3 other people, and I got the job, and that was a big turning point for me.
So you had this entrepreneurial drive growing up. You then chose Bay Street for 5 years, and then you made a dramatic pivot. 2 weeks to pack up everything. You left your girlfriend behind, and you showed up in Eastern Europe with a backpack. If you could walk me through that transformation from aspiring entrepreneur, now you're on Bay Street, to Uber International. If you could walk me through that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so in 2009 to 2014, I was working in private equity investing. And the last year and a half, I really started to lose interest. And I felt, a couple of things. One, I'd grown up in Toronto. I was surrounded by the community I grew up with and a lot of comfort. But I had this feeling like I should have left, and I'm now 28. It's too late. All my friends that went to New York, they're all coming back. But I was lost, and I sort of realized I don't want to become a partner in a private equity firm. All these meetings we have with these companies, I want to be on the other side of the table. Like, we're doing all this analysis, but then what are they doing? And so I flew to New York on my own dime in February of 2015. And I was going to go spend a week there networking with startups and just learning about that ecosystem. And I went to a coding boot camp, and I thought about doing it. And then I wandered into Central Park, and it sounds kind of dramatic, but I spent like 2 or 3 hours walking around. And I had this epiphany, which is I have to be here. I have to leave Canada. I have to get out of my comfort zone, and I have to change my life now. Like, there's an opportunity now to get back to that childhood dream. And I flew back, and I committed myself that I was going to spend the next couple of months finding a startup job. I met with every startup in New York, and fortunately, I got introduced to Uber. They were hiring in New York for an operations manager role. I interviewed with Josh Moore, the GM there, and to my heartbreak, they came back and said, "We like you. We think you could be an ops manager in New York, but we're not going to sponsor your visa. It's too difficult." And so I got really discouraged. But I went through that networking again, and someone I met at Uber came and met with me that I knew growing up. He was back in town, and we sat for coffee, and he looked awful. Like, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. And I said, what have you been doing? And he's like, "I'm an international launcher at Uber. I just launched Australia, and I was in Montreal last month. We just launched there, and now I'm going to Helsinki." And I said, "Wow, you're going around the world launching Uber. This is wild." And at the end, he said, "If you're interested in doing this, I can put you in touch with my boss." I got in touch with him, and I interviewed for the international launcher job, which was a very extreme job title and job description. And in the final round, they said, "Are you serious about this? There's some things you need to know. You will be working 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The launch team lives in the cities they're launching. They are alone the entire time. There is no home for you. So you'll be working the whole time. You'll be alone the entire time. And we will deploy you anywhere in the world on a moment's notice, and you won't have a say in it. Are you comfortable with this? And how are you going to deal with this if we send you to Cairo?" And they listed all these parts of the world, and they said, "If we send you there, you ready to go move there for 3-4 months and be alone?" And I got pretty scared and nervous, and I said, "I don't know. Can I take a bit of time off before I start?" And they said, "If you want to do this, you're starting in 2 weeks. Meet us in Frankfurt and just bring a carry-on bag." And I went home, and I thought, this is more extreme than I thought. I don't know where this is going to go. I'm going to leave Toronto. God only knows where I'm going to end up. And I called a cousin of mine who was an early employee at Google, and I said, "David, what do you think about this?" And he said, "There are a few moments in your life where you have an opportunity to get on a rocket ship. Don't waste your time asking what seat you're getting on the rocket ship. Get on the rocket ship. If it doesn't work out, you'll find something else. This will probably be a career-defining moment for you." And I joined and started in May of 2014.
What did the people around you say when you made that jump?
My boss in private equity was really angry with me. They said, you're leaving a private equity job. You've done the CFA program. You're on track to be a partner. You're making a lot of money. And you're going to go join a taxi company, and you're going to move to Eastern Europe. What are you doing? And my family said to some extent the same thing, and friends. And I just thought, you know what? I know I'll regret this if I don't do it, so I'm going to do it and go for it.
What would you say to a younger professional, younger entrepreneur that has that opportunity in front of them, but they're getting that pressure externally to stay in their comfort zone?
You got to follow your heart. I think at the end of the day, it's your life. And I remember reading Jeff Bezos once talked about the regret minimization framework. If you listen to the story of founding Amazon, he left D.E. Shaw, a very high paying job. And he talked about this thing of they're probably right that I shouldn't do this. But if I think forward 25 years, I believe I will regret this. And if I don't try, and it will bother me for the rest of my life. And I don't want to regret that. And so reading that and thinking about that helped me kind of gain the courage to do it. But I also had 5 years of work experience, and I knew, if it didn't work out, I'd be able to find a job. And, I think for someone young thinking about taking the plunge, you should do it. In fact, you should do it earlier in life. It only gets harder. If I would have done anything differently, I would have done it when I was 25. Because at 30 or 28, 29, your friends are getting married, things are changing in life. And so my insight has been as I get older, most young people want the most secure job they can find and then work their confidence up to doing something risky. You should actually do the exact opposite. You can have the highest risk tolerance in your early 20s. And when you're 30 to 40, it's going to be a lot harder for you to move, not have work-life balance, because you're going to probably have other things going on in your life, including starting a family.
Yeah, I completely understand that, because I kind of went down that path myself, where I was in corporate for a long time and now I'm doing my own thing. And there was a number of factors that kind of pushed me out the nest, but it's hard. Like when I have a baby girl at home and I'm married, to be able to commit myself and like go all in on something, I'll never look back, because I was meant to be an entrepreneur. I know that now, but it's tough to make that shift later on in life. And I just don't think there's enough people in Canada. I didn't even realize that this was an option for whatever reason. Yeah. I think that's why like hearing your story is so important, and hearing it directly from you and other founders that have been successful, because I think it's a part of Canadian culture not to even realize that this isn't a real option you could fucking go after.
I think when I was in school, you have a perception of the world, which is the world is run by highly intelligent, sophisticated people. All these tall buildings and companies are, well run and well structured. And I found getting into private equity, I realized that wasn't the case. People are making it up as they go along. Once you get on the inside, it's not what you think it is. And I also learned that there is an army of people in the workforce that are assessing businesses and judging them and analyzing them. What should one do? And there's, the ratio of people doing that relative to people building businesses is like 100 to 1. And someone said something to me early in private equity, which is, kid, insights are easy. The work you're doing to analyze this company, that's the easy part. What you're recommending and what the company needs to do, that's the hard part. Only 1 out of 100 people do that. The other 99 judge, criticize, and consult. And he finished that sentence by saying, pessimists sound smart, optimists make money. And it helped me realize that you have to make bets in your career. You have to make best bets in your life. And the upside from making a bet and getting it right is much greater than the downside of not trying at all. And that was a really helpful frame that I've kept in my mind since then.
After Uber now, you met your co-founders over what you called, when we first chatted, the bloody expense report. But before that, you never met them, as far as I understand. You were somehow invited to join their 7-day-a-week, 7 a.m. stand-up that had been going on for 15 months. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so in 2019, I left Uber, and I've been running Uber Canada. And I left, and I took some time off, and I was thinking about starting a business or maybe buying a business with some investors and going to run it. And, I went to a little office every day and wrote business plans. And, I was pretty lost, but I was trying to just assess and look at every opportunity under the sun. So I met a lot of different founders in Canada and great companies that, we now know or maybe float customers. But the people, the opportunity, and the industry didn't feel right. And I got introduced in January of 2020 by a venture firm here in Canada to my co-founders, Griffin and Ruslan. And they said, these are 2 of the youngest founders we've backed. They're still in school. They are 2 of the smartest people we've ever met. They are incredibly technically proficient. They work extremely hard. They need a third partner to help them bring this thing to life. And they've built a couple of different apps, but they need to choose a path and move forward. And so I got introduced to them. And, when I went to the meeting, the moment I met them, I thought like, this is all wrong. Like they're too young. This is way too early stage for me. I'm probably not going to be a fit here. And, they had built the first version of the product, but there was like 80K in the bank. The cash balance was dwindling. And I came home and I sort of said to my wife, like, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. And then I sat with them and I asked them to show me what they had built. And they said, we had this idea when we were interns at Uber and Shopify. They were both interns separately at those two companies. We had these expense report issues where we organized a laser tag event. And they told me this whole story about paying for a laser tag event for interns and then having to recoup the money. And they thought, this is so stupid. Like, we're students. Why would the company have us shell out this money? And with issuing technology, what if we built software that could manage that? And they flipped the computer around and they said, check this out. And they typed into Slack, hey, Rob, I need, $25 for an Amazon card to buy XYZ. Do you approve it? And then you click approve, and all of a sudden I get a Slack that shows me a single-use Visa card. Oh, cool. And I, that brought me back to the CD-ROM, writer. I said like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And the software does this, and now we just need to get the card to transact. And they said, no. They go on Amazon and buy something, and the card worked. And I was like, number one, I had this problem at Uber. No one had bigger expense reports than me because I was living around the world 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every expense I had was paid for by Uber, which sounds great, but it's actually a pain in the ass. You have to track everything you're doing. And I had this really painful expense report experience when I was in Romania with 160,000 euros that I couldn't get reimbursed because I couldn't find all the receipts, and HQ at Uber was making me jump through all these hoops. So it, like, immediately as a customer, as a user, became real. And I sort of saw what the opportunity was. And then I said, how did you build this? And they said, well, we went and talked to this person and we studied this and then we tried that. And I said, but how did you get Visa issuing up? And they said, well, we got into this program with Visa and we spoke to this advisor and then we set up this legal entity. And I said, but then how do you move the money to settle the transaction? And they said, well, we had to open these bank accounts and set up a balance pool with our code base. And I just kept asking them how they did things. And the more they answered, the more I realized, as someone who, was later in my career, like, one, I would have never been able to do half of what they had done. And two, that they were able to solve problems and be resourceful in a way that is incredibly rare. And they were relentless. So after that meeting, I said, I don't know if I'm going to join. Why don't we just work together and I'll advise you and help you and mentor you? And so they said, sure, happy to do that. And they added me to this stand-up. And the next day I joined the stand-up and I saw that it was a 9 a.m. stand-up or 8 a.m. stand-up or 9 a.m. stand-up that had been running 7 days a week for 18 months or 15 months. And that's when I knew these guys were serious, they were committed, they were bright. And that's how it started.
Was it at that point when you knew that this was a team of co-founders you wanted to bet your career on?
I left the first meeting knowing whether I joined them or not, that I'd read about them in a magazine one day. Like, it was not even a shadow of a doubt. Like, I knew that those guys would, they're learning machines, and they had learned things that, like, I had seen in my career myself, and leaders have taken a decade to learn, and they were able very, very quickly, even between meetings, to grasp concepts that they shouldn't have necessarily based on their level of experience, and be very resourceful. And they taught me a ton. And so I knew right away, whether I joined them or not, they were going to do something. And so that 6 to 8 weeks before I formally joined was me writing a business plan, doing market research, and trying to understand what would bringing this product to market look like, what would it take, and is there a business? And I did my private equity process. So I wrote myself a memo, which helps me organize my thoughts. What's the market opportunity? How big could the market be? What are the potential products we could bring? And what would this be all about? And once I did that and read through a bunch of the research and shared it with them, it started to become really clear there was a huge opportunity.
When we originally chatted, you talked me through a very specific process in terms of evaluating co-founders. Intelligence, passion, determination. This is something that a lot of founders really struggle with, but I don't hear a lot of people actually talking about in terms of business content. Can you break down how someone actually should choose the right co-founder?
Yeah, it's, I learned a lot because I met a lot of co-founders and founders, and I got some good advice. Number one is don't just start working with founders. You should date. You're not going to interview co-founders and then choose to join and, do that after 5 hours of interviews. The lowest risk way to do this is actually just to start working together. So I sort of said, for 6 weeks, we'll just work together and maybe I can help them. So that eliminated some of the formality and pressure to just go, do we like each other? How do we think? Are we complementary? So that was one huge help. Two is, I think in a founders, you have to see someone that is so committed, that is so driven, that they will their way into success, even when there are a million reasons to fail. Like willpower, sheer determination is incredibly important. And, despite their age, I thought that their sheer willpower and determination was greater than most of the founders I had met. And I was in awe of it. So that checked a box for me. Third was values. It might sound cheesy, but before we started, I wrote them a 1-page email and I said, these are my values. If I'm building a business, this is what I believe about how that business should be built and how I'll make decisions and how the company should make decisions. And what I believe will cultivate, a really world-class team and company and propel a company to success. And I said, does this work for you? And what do you think of this? Because these are non-negotiables for me. And they, not only did they agree, but they demonstrated very early that they were serious about it. And one of the best examples of that was they said, we don't want to, neither of us want to be the CEO. So we're recruiting you as a CEO. And I said, okay, but if I'm the CEO, here's how I'm going to make decisions. For example, one of the principles that I operate with is I'm going to do always what's best for float, then the team, and then individuals in that order. And I actually shared with them one of the things that will happen if this starts to work is the co-founder jobs will change. And I will make decisions and we'll make decisions to bring the best people in to do the job wherever that might be. That might mean if you're running engineering as a 3-person team, we may get to a point in 9 months where I recruit someone to run engineering if that's not the best place for you. And I'll make those decisions over our self-interest if I believe they're the right thing for the company. Do you agree with that? And are you prepared for that? And they said, yes. And I said, but don't you want to be the CEO? Are you sure you really want me to come here? Because you're going to give up some of your power in doing that. And they said, we don't care about that. We want to build a winning business. We want to build product. We want to solve customer problems. If you can help us get there, then that's what this is about. And so they have shown from that first day to this day an incredible commitment to doing the right thing for the company and letting their roles and our roles evolve to serve the company, as opposed to having the company revolve around what each of us want to do. And that was a huge show of maturity that, for me, put it over the edge.
What's the age gap with you and the other co-founders?
It's about 10 years and 12 years.
But they've shown that maturity very early on. And those concerns were brushed aside.
And they still, to this day, we've had, as we've built Float, many moments in time where there's hard decisions to make. And we've recruited amazing talent. And I shared with them very early, they said, what are you going to do here? And I said, we are going to spend 50% of our time, if this product works, recruiting. And they said, that's insane. And I said, trust me, this is what it takes to build a world-class team. You don't build a world-class business. You build a world-class team, and then you build a world-class business. And they said, okay. And so I started recruiting a lot, and we started closing really great people. And I think once they saw that, they saw, wow, this person can come here. Are they going to help us succeed? Are they going to help us level up what we're doing? If they're going to make us better, then of course we should recruit them. And they've done that time and time again. And I think that's something that separates those guys from the vast majority of co-founders in Canada and probably anywhere, is selflessness and pure mission conviction.
Okay. Well, you've talked about like that dating process when you're trying to find a co-founder, and you've talked about the green flags that your current co-founders showed you. What are the red flags? So if someone was going in to potentially meet with a co-founder and they're making that choice and they're dating them, what red flags should they be looking out for?
Well, I'll start by saying this term, red flag, green flag, I get a little triggered by it because I think the reality is everyone's green flag and red flag is different. So businesses are made in all shapes and sizes. There's no right way to do it. There's no right philosophy. Yeah. This is one of the sentiments in the market that I think is nonsense. People should do whatever they aspire to do. And so if you want to build a certain type of a startup and operate a certain way, and those are your personal beliefs, then you should find co-founders that share in those beliefs. Actually writing out what those beliefs are is really, really valuable. But I think number one is finding people that are genuine. If you are sitting around and you hear people saying, you know, let's start this business and we could flip it in 2 or 3 years and make a bunch of money, a lot of people have that mindset. The difficulty is that within 6 months, it will become so hard that any rational person would give up. And so you need people that are irrationally committed. And I saw that in them, and I saw real passion. I saw that it wasn't superficial. They weren't interested in making a bunch of money. In fact, we've never, as co-founders, still 5 years later, talked about that. We haven't talked about an exit path for Float. We truly only spend our time talking about building the best company on earth. And that resonates with me. I think in founders, you need to find complementary skills. Most of my failed attempts to start businesses were with people that were too much like me. And so what I saw in my co-founders, despite the age gap, is extraordinary computer science capabilities, very, very, very deep mathematical capabilities, and a real ability to build product. I couldn't do any of those things, but I could recruit and I could deal with the board and investors and raise capital and sort of put it together as a company. And I think you do need 3 people or 2 people that are going to complement each other and are going to bring different skills and value to the company, because you do need that. When you're 5 people, 6 people, the job titles don't matter as much, CEO, co-founder, but you need to divide and conquer, and you need people that have the opposite skills as you have.
So how do you measure, especially in that dating period, actual passion and ability versus just enthusiasm?
I mean, I think you get it when you get into long form discussions, right? And so if you think about a startup, you might think about a market opportunity, the product opportunity, and the people you work with. Those are probably like the 3 most important filters. So one is you have to see a big market opportunity. And we saw that. And that's more of an IQ exercise. When you come to product, though, you can't fake that. To build a great product, you actually have to be really passionate about it. And you have to intellectually be convinced that there's a better way that you've come up with. And I saw in them this like obsession with meeting companies and understanding how they do business, and then realizing like, oh my God, there is a better way. And we can't stop thinking about this. And so what I saw from them was like, there was no personal life. There was no like anything else. They were like, this is all we want to do 7 days a week. If I texted them on the weekend, they're sitting at their computer thinking about this. And I started to feel the same way. I was like, I'm so emotionally invested in this because I think this could change how companies do business. And it's fun. It's like, I'd rather be doing this right now than playing golf. And I couldn't let it go. And I think that you have to have that insatiable intellectual curiosity and passion, or else it's just not going to work. Because, you know, and I use the quote, it's cheesy, but Steve Jobs, like it resonates. Building a company is so fucking hard that any rational person would give up along the way. And so if you're not really passionate and you don't actually view this as the most exciting hobby you could invest in your life, you're just not going to get through all the ups and downs because it's really hard.
What makes it so hard?
Everything. I mean, there's just a million reasons it's not going to work. I'll give you an example. When we started together, what are some of the things? You know, we had $80,000 in the bank. We didn't even have enough capital to hire an employee. And it was unclear we'd be able to raise capital. The product we were dreaming of building, the path to building it was pretty foggy. And we actually didn't know what to build after that, even though we knew people wanted that first product. There were 4 other companies in Canada as we started fundraising that we discovered are building the exact same thing. And so people said, you know, these folks have more experience, they're bank executives, why are you going to be successful? Recruiting. We couldn't convince a developer. I couldn't give away points in the company. We offered 2% of the company to entry-level developers, and they wouldn't take it. And they just said, what you guys are doing doesn't seem like it's going to go anywhere, and we couldn't hire anyone. And every step of the way, you're eating glass. You're talking to people who are saying things to you, and you deep down know they're right in some areas, and it's scary. And you then launch a product, and something goes wrong, and there's an emergency, and you've incorrectly processed payments, and now a bunch of customers are mad at you. These things happen like thousands and thousands of times in the first couple of years. And at every step of the way, there's reasonable doubt about, okay, you got to this milestone, but how are you going to get to the next one? How are you going to recruit these types of people if they don't want to join? How are you going to overcome an obstacle with a vendor or a supplier that if it's not fixed, your product just won't work? And it's endless. It is literally endless, which is why I think you have to be passionate and you have to be relentless, because most rational people along the way will actually agree with those criticisms and become discouraged. And your job as an entrepreneur is not to be right about everything. It's to overcome obstacles and move forward continuously. And as you do that, and as things start to work, you build momentum. And that is one thing I've learned about building companies, is that once momentum builds, it compounds. And it really has a magnifying impact. When you start to grow, you start to gain confidence. When you close one really talented person, you start to gain confidence. When one or two really talented people come to your company and join you, suddenly other people think, well, maybe I could do that because I know that person or I've worked for that person. And so it compounds. And there's this idea in finance of compound interest. And I think compounding works in startups when it comes to momentum and belief in the mission. But you lose it from time to time, and you need to be mentally really tough.
Was there ever a point, especially in those first couple of years, where I guess now, has there ever been a point where you're like, fuck, I don't think this is going to work? And how did you get through that moment?
I haven't felt it's not going to work for a long time, actually. I found the longer we've been building Float, the deeper my belief has become. But I feel that all the time. There's months here and weeks here and days here where I feel deeply insecure about not whether the company can succeed, but whether or not I'll do a good enough job leading Float to success, whether or not we collectively will do the things we need to do, overcome the challenges we have to overcome. And I grapple with that insecurity every day.
So I'm just starting a new business like this week,
Yeah.
a new agency.
Exciting.
And it's exciting, but I have those same, feelings of doubt and insecurity like everyone else does. If you're talking to me like right now about getting through that, what would you say?
Everyone doing what you aspire to do is no smarter than you. They're just making it up as they go along. And so the more you talk to people that are running big companies and you get some space with them in a vulnerable space, maybe they'll tell you, I'm making this up. Like, there's all these things we don't know how to do yet. I'm figuring it out. And you start to realize that these superheroes that you look up to and aspire to maybe be, they're human. They feel the same thing. They struggle with the same thing. And they'll remind you, you're going to get a bunch of things wrong, but you don't need to get everything right. You just need to get a handful of things right. Yeah. And when things go wrong, you just need to fix them. And you need to get better every single day. And I think that mindset helps build courage and confidence, because you don't need to be perfect. Building a company happens in stages. And so one of the things that I've found is helpful is at the very beginning, if you think you're going to build a company, you're like, I'm going to walk 1,000 miles. Walking 1,000 miles is really hard. Yeah. If you say this stage of getting the company off the ground means getting 60 customers and having our product do X, Y, and Z. Let's just get to that point, and then we'll figure out the rest. And it's a tactic the Navy SEALs use in Hell Week. And they talk about 5.5 days, 23 hours a day of work, and how do humans mentally get through what is 5.5 days with only 3 hours of sleep. And the hack that they have, and there's books written about this in psychology about it, which is just get to the next stage. Keep your world small. Don't worry about trying to build a 10-year company at the beginning. Just worry about getting your product in market and getting customer feedback. Once you get customer feedback, you can iterate on your product and make it better, but get to that point. And I think thinking in stages has been helpful to make building a company a little bit more approachable, and help me, and I think help others remember, do the thing in front of you and don't worry about all the things that come after it. And as your business grows, you can widen your aperture on the time horizon. But the best way to get a business off the ground is to focus very aggressively on short-term outcomes that get you to that long-term vision or that you think move you in that direction. Because those are the things that kill businesses. Most businesses don't get the chance to get to that next stage because they didn't cross this stage. So I would say to our team all the time, I know we want to do all these other things, but think of a video game. My co-founders play video games. We're thinking about beating the boss in level 10. We're on level 1. If we lose level 1, we don't even get to go to level 2. So let's win level 1, and that forces a tremendous amount of focus.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay, so now, Rob, I want to shift to Canada. And you talked when we chatted previously about Canada having what you called a bronze culture, and that building a startup means 7 days a week, no days off, no holidays. But some people would call that toxic. What's your response to that?
My response is that everyone should follow their passion. And this idea that there's a red flag and a green flag and there's a right company culture, it's nonsense. There's a million companies in Canada. There's something for everyone. So I think the starting premise for me is this sort of like monolithic view of building companies is ridiculous. You know, if a company wants to be the best company on earth in its area and operate with a certain culture that they believe, you know, resonates with them and their mission and is going to be what it takes to build that company, they should do that. And people should self-select into that company because they want to do that. And if people don't and they want to do something else, they should go follow their passion and do that. So I sort of reject this notion that there's a right way to do it. There's a red flag, a green flag. My belief is that, you know, if you meet 100 talented people, you'll find that what draws them in and attracts them is different depending on the person you're talking to. So I think diversity of culture, diversity of philosophy, diversity of approaches should be celebrated because that's what the market is all about. Second is building a startup on average fails. So if you think about a company that has established itself, has profit, they're a going concern, you can count on that business almost certainly existing 5 years from now. Startups don't play that game. They don't operate in that arena. Startups operate in an arena where 95% of them will fail within 3 years of starting. And so if you're going to be in that arena, you have to operate with a philosophy that you believe will allow you to succeed in that arena. And the simple reality is at the beginning of building a startup, you just simply will not get anywhere if you are not working extremely hard. And it doesn't matter whether you're comfortable with that or not, or you want to do that or not. It's just a reality. There are people out there in the world who are probably thinking about the exact same problem, who are more passionate than you, who are going to work harder than you. It's competitive out there. I mentioned that we had 4 other companies building the exact same thing as Float. And had we not worked really hard, and had we not shipped our product really quickly, and had we not operated with desperation and urgency, we wouldn't have even got the business off the ground. And so we wouldn't be here without that. And of course, as the company goes through different stages, it may evolve. But the reality is that if you want to build a world-changing company, you can't do that with your hands in your pockets. You just can't. And so what I think that means is people that join a startup should really believe in the future of the company and should really want to create and invent the future of that industry and be committed and accept that what that company and that mission will require from them is going to be extraordinary. And it's not about, you know, we don't say at Float like work 7 days a week and don't take holidays. We don't say that. People have a tremendous amount of flexibility. But we do say this will probably be the hardest thing you've ever done. You will invest to be successful here. You will need to apply yourself and work hard in a way that probably transcends a normal job. And for us to be successful, that's the attitude we have to have, because no matter what work environment we want to cultivate, we're focused on our customers. We're focused on where we want to take our customers, where we want to take our industry. And our customers will reward us if we do that, and we'll lose if we don't satisfy them and someone else does. So we're actually all competing to serve our customers. And we're not alone. There are so many companies out there, so many founders in every category. So you have to embrace the idea that the likelihood of success is very low. There will be numerous competitors trying to do the same things. There are going to be numerous obstacles along the way. And you're going to have to overcome hard things. You're going to have to apply yourself. You're going to have to solve problems. And you're going to have to operate with willpower, determination, and courage. And I think that that's the most important thing people need to bring to a startup if they want to go and make a real impact and change the world. Because to be honest, even as CEO, I can't control what's going to happen. I'll give you an example. We launched our billing product about 2 years ago. It was the first time we charged customers for our product. We've been asking them to pay, and we got them to agree to pay. And we woke up one day and I realized we hadn't even been charging them. So we rolled out a billing system, and something went wrong. And on Friday night, 2 years ago, at 7 p.m., we had like a big alarm sound in the company, and we realized we had charged all these customers and it was an issue. And it was like, all right, then we're just all online this weekend and we just have to work through this, or all these customers are going to leave us and we're going to erode trust. I can't prevent that from happening. Even if I said, folks, it's okay, go home and we'll pick this up on Monday, I would actually be hurting them because the company would suffer and then they'd suffer. And we may not be able to recover from something like that. And so we always used this phrase, and I still do, which is we're default dead. So when you come to work, you actually have to embrace the idea that whatever we've achieved to this point, our success and our ability to build this company is going to be based on our ability to continue 10xing our impact. And if we don't do that, we could die. And I actually think seeing companies die is clarifying. We saw that in 2021. A lot of startups around us that we looked up to, that we admired, that people said, this is the way to do it. And we thought, we'd love to get to that point. Many of them became, quote unquote unicorns, and they're gone. And that rattled us and focused us to remind us that you can die in this industry. You can have way more success than float. You can raise way more capital and have way more customers, and you can still die. In fact, when I left Uber, right after I left, 90% of Uber's revenue dropped off a cliff when COVID hit. Yeah. And what did they do? They had to work their tails off to overcome that. And so every business goes through that. And I think startups more often than not are very susceptible to those risks. And so you just have to embrace it. And, the way I think about it is if you want to play rec hockey, I'm a terrible hockey player. I play house league hockey. I like to play once a week. It's not very intense. I'm not preparing in advance, and it's just a skate. If you want to play in the startup arena and you want to build one of the best companies on earth, you're playing in the NHL, you're playing in the NBA. If you meet people that are at that peak of their game and you compare them to the average person, you'd think they're crazy. They're working out 5 hours a day. Sure. They are practicing twice a day. They are competing in practice like they're in a game. They are very competitive to almost a fault. But that's how they are at that level. And so you have to come back to this idea of what arena are you in? And that arena will dictate, in some cases, what's required to be successful. And so if you look at it through that lens, you start to make it a little less confrontational about is it right or wrong, to just say, what league do you want to be in? What do you want to work towards? Follow your heart, but know that if you're going to go into this field and you're going to do this, these are the trade-offs. And I think that's a really important mindset for people to have. When I joined my co-founders, I said to my wife, there's a real trade-off here. I'm going to have no salary for the next couple of years. This will probably go nowhere. I'll be working 7 days a week, and I'll have a huge amount of pressure on me, but I will feel fulfilled, and I want to do it. And this is the trade-off I'm willing to make. And I think that that's important. You have to actually navigate intentionally what are the trade-offs I'm going to make? And I found that in private equity too. I had a high salary. I had a prestigious job. I actually had work-life balance, but I wanted to follow my heart. And the trade-off I made was less security, less salary. And now when people come to me and say, how can I get to do what you got to do? And I want to do that. I remind them of the sacrifices. I went to Eastern Europe for 3.5 years, and I was alone the entire time. I worked 70, 80 hours a week. I failed repeatedly to the point that I was insecure about the mistakes I was making. And I did those things and I kept doing it because I was passionate and I loved it. And now I get to do this, but it wouldn't happen without those sacrifices. And so I think this idea of being in a startup and being an entrepreneur, but not wanting the downsides, is a trap Canada is stuck in, which is like, you want your cake and you want to eat it too. You have to make those commitments and sacrifices like anything else in life.
So the other thing you talked about is this bronze culture that you talked about.
It's Toby at Shopify. It's his quote. Yeah, but
I never heard it before. But if you could talk me through that, and if you, the follow-up question is, in Canada, what does demanding more from service providers actually look like?
So when we started Float, one of the things we started with was this idea of we're going to raise standards. We are going to operate with ridiculously high standards. We're going to, for our customers in Canada, the business customer is used to being served between 9 and 4, not on holidays, not getting any response outside of those hours. And the way they're going to be supported is by showing up to a branch. And they're going to have to do a bunch of things to get help. And we said, we're not going to do that. If you are a customer of Float, you're going to get a response 7 days a week, 24 hours a day in 1 minute. And we are going to blow the market away because we are going to operate with a customer service standard that is extremely high. What's required to do that is a tremendous amount of hard work and pressure and a commitment to doing that. And so we talked about not tomorrow, today. Not good enough in Canada, but the best in Canada. Like, we talk about these things and say, we don't want to be good. We want to be great. We don't want to be a good product. We want to be a revolutionary product. We don't want to be a good service provider to our customers. We want to be the best service provider to our customers. And there's a real market opportunity in Canada because standards are so low. Businesses and consumers here have been misled because of the way Canada's economy is structured into thinking that this is what they have to settle for. And we get a lot of joy out of rejecting that and saying, no, we're not going to do that. We are going to offer a level of service that you might find in the United States or in Europe in a more competitive market. And that's the bar that we're going to hold ourselves to. And I think that it's an opportunity and a challenge for Canada. The opportunity is so few people do this and so few companies do this that when you do it, you can really stand out. It's actually easy relative to being, for example, in a different market. The counterpoint to that is that it's hard and people need to have courage. And Canada in some areas has serious cultural challenges when it comes to innovation. And those, I believe, are really tied to an obsession with fairness over merit, an excessive focus on the right way to operate as opposed to what actually drives success. And you can see examples of this where some of the best entrepreneurs in Canada are like attacked for what they're doing because people think it's not the right way to do it. And yet, if you look back over 100 years, they're some of the greatest entrepreneurs the country's ever had. In my view, the country and Canada, we should be learning from these people. How did Toby build Shopify in Ottawa into this global powerhouse instead of judging and criticizing everything that they do and saying, well, that may not be fair, this is not reasonable? You should actually seek to learn from them. Maybe they've done something that the rest of our country can learn from. And I think that that attitude that he talks about of going for bronze is really powerful, and it's inspired me. I've had moments in time in Float's journey where I felt I was going for bronze and I wasn't being ambitious enough. And I went to see Toby talk, and he said, we have all the brains in this country. We have all the natural resources. We have a highly educated group of people. We are an advanced economy. We have all the ingredients, but people in Canada seem to lack the courage to build something world-class, lack the courage to say, this is what we're going to do, and we don't care if people agree with it or not. We are convicted, and we want to go be the best in the world in our industry, not just good in Canada. And I didn't understand it the first few times I heard it, but now I do. And I think that that's the biggest challenge we face actually at Float in recruiting now is there's an abundance of skills. There's an abundance of experiences. The rare thing to find now in building a company is people that have those skills, but actually have the courage to put forward a really bold idea and have it not work, that have the courage to set a goal that's 50% higher than they think is reasonable, that have the courage to let go of the safety of maybe a corporate job and go join a startup and take the risk and have the upside opportunity that comes with joining a startup, which is extreme learning and growth, getting to do things you're not qualified to do because the company can't hire fast enough to find qualified people to do it. I benefited from that in my career. And so I think it's very much a psychological limitation we have in the market. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for it, but it's very clear. And it's something that Canada needs to change if it's going to get back to being competitive globally and to delivering the kind of economic prosperity that we actually need, not just to grow our economy, but to actually ensure like our social welfare system is resourced and funded for the next decade.
So when we first spoke, you told me that you felt the pull to leave Canada, like many of your peers, but you chose to stay here and build Float here. So what made you decide to build here in Toronto instead of Silicon Valley?
Well, it started for me from an employee perspective. I left Uber, but I gained a tremendous appreciation for Canada. I lived in Eastern Europe, for 4 years. And I came back on purpose. And I thought there's a whole bunch of reasons I believe Europe is not a great future. And I'm coming back to Canada now so appreciative and so fortunate of what we have in Canada. Like so many things that Canada has that the vast majority of countries don't have. So number one was I felt this deep appreciation for Canada, but I wasn't motivated to work for anyone in Canada because I didn't see anyone that was championing that kind of mindset. So as an employee, potentially, I selfishly was like, I wish there was a company in Canada for all the hardcore builders that I'm meeting that I know that would keep people here, not have them go join an American company, and that would build a world-class company by Canadians for Canadians. And that was like a something, even at the earliest stages, we were really excited about. And so number one, like selfishly, I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it because I felt a sense of, I don't know, some sort of feeling of responsibility that like I learned a lot at Uber and I benefited from these experiences. And I don't want to go invest that in the US. I want to invest that here, and that will hopefully cultivate something that will benefit more than just what I'm doing. And then when we came up with a business idea and the product opportunity, we did look at different markets, and it became really clear there was a huge opportunity in Canada, a much bigger opportunity than we had initially thought. And so we've proudly kept our mission fully focused on Canada. And it's a big part of our DNA. We want Canada to win, and we think that our opportunity is to build Float and build products that ignite the full potential of Canadian companies. So if we build Float into a winner, that might be great for Canada, but even better would be if the companies that use Float win themselves, and that's a way that we can magnify our impact across the country in a way that transcends, Float's revenue or the number of customers it serves and what we're doing here every day.
Why do you care? Like, why is that important to you?
I didn't 5 years ago, but I really started to care when I came back, and I appreciated what Canada has. And then I started to really care when I saw Canada go off the rails. When I started to see the economic data, everyone's been talking about it the last couple of years, the future of our economy and labor productivity and innovation, business formation. It angered me. It actually pissed me off. And I thought, I feel in some small way like I have an obligation and a responsibility to do something and help, because Canada's given me everything. Like I got free healthcare. I grew up in a safe environment. I got to go to school here. I was surrounded by multiculturalism that was, in my view, the best version of multiculturalism I've ever felt. And I just thought, like, why not try this, and why not try to make an impact here? And as time goes on and as Float has evolved, I think our mission emotionally has deeper significance for every single person here, including the co-founders, than it's ever had. A couple of years ago, we just wanted to build a great company, and that was it. And now we feel a tremendous obligation and responsibility to shepherd our customers and the businesses in Canada into the future, to do the work that others aren't willing to do to deliver them those experiences. And, I have to say, a couple of years ago, success may have been like build a successful company and, maybe it's worth a bunch and all the employees and everyone here got to make money and it created financial wealth for them in addition to these like lifelong career-changing experiences. And now it feels like it's something much bigger. Now it feels like, yeah, that's important and we want to do that. But if we wake up in 10 years and that's happened, but we haven't fundamentally changed our industry, then we'll have felt regret and that we missed something. And I think that as a Canadian, that pressure, that motivation right now is more meaningful and more connected to our souls truly than it's ever been. No question about it.
So let's talk about float. What's the core problem that float solves, and how do you solve that problem better than anyone else?
So the core problem is that business finance is broken. And it's broken because companies today use a patchwork of products and services to conduct business. You might have bank accounts with 4 or 5 different financial institutions. You might use 16 different pieces of software just to get the books closed at the end of the month. So the problem is that the vast majority of Canadian companies have their most precious resource, their human capital, very educated people, particularly in finance and accounting, that are doing monkey work. They're doing work that is often not driving the kind of impact they want to have. They're stuck reconciling transactions from credit card statements. And so they can't reach their full potential, and those companies can't reach their full potential. And so the problem that we're solving is fragmentation of how customers access capital, broken experiences when it comes to closing your books, and ultimately an inability to rise above the 5,000 feet of altitude to focus on how do we build better products? How do we launch new markets? How do we grow the revenue of our company, which are the things that ultimately drive economic prosperity? And so we're all about enabling those companies by offering them a financial platform where they can handle all of their B2B spending end to end in one place, where Float will automate 85-90% of the painful administrative actions and make them go away, so that companies gain back 80% of their time to focus on things that are going to move the business forward. That's what Float's all about.
And if you could just summarize the progress and growth of Float. So when did you start Float? How big is it today? And where is it going to be in 5 years?
Float probably officially launched in May of 2021. We had no payment volume, 0, and we had no customers, maybe 3 or 4. Today, we serve 4,000 customers. We process almost $2 billion a year in annualized payment volume and several hundred million on a monthly basis. And we're really proud to not just do that, but also to have a suite of products that now enable customers to manage most of their B2B payments on Float, whereas they used to only be able to manage their card-based spending, to offer customers access to capital. And we've launched a whole new set of products over the last couple of years, moving from that first cards product to now other methods of payment, wire payments, EFTs, bill payments, personal reimbursements for employees, access to credit, financial products like yield that help customers increase the rate of return on the cash that they have in the bank. And those are all things that are driving ROI for companies and saving them time. So that's where we are today. And in 5 years, our goal is for Float to be processing over $10 billion of payment volume, to be serving hundreds of thousands of businesses, and to have fundamentally given back to those companies 80% of their time so that they can go focus on building the best businesses on earth.
Okay, thank you for that. So last question here. If you were speaking to an aspiring Canadian entrepreneur and they're on the cusp of launching a business, and if you had one thing to say to them, one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
Believe in yourself more than you actually do. And the more you believe in yourself more than you actually do, the more you will begin to become the person you know you need to be. I think that's probably it.
Okay, that's super powerful. Rob, thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.